Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. I am Roger Hodson and going to talk today about establishing reference conditions to support habitat assessment in citizen science. And I'd like to acknowledge a number of people from Environment Southland field team, Nathan Hughes, Murray-Line Lynn, Rob Williams, Dave Collins, Nuon De Silva, and a couple of others who've been quite involved in fieldwork, as well as Joanne Klipcott from Cawthron. So, over the last couple of years, there have been, a huge increase in the number of catchment groups around the Southland region, and within those groups, a big increase in their interest in undertaking citizen science activities, interest in monitoring water quality, particularly, and while water quality is a very important aspect of healthy, resilient ecosystems, of I think equal importance are ecosystem function and stream habitat conditions. So there's an opportunity for Environment Southland to support these community catchment groups in their citizen science endeavours around habitat assessment, something that hasn't been done a lot of historically. But in order to do that, we really need to establish some good understanding of reference conditions to aid interpretation. So I'm going to talk first about establishing reference conditions and designing a program to collect some information around the region on reference conditions, and then a little bit more about the opportunity to support that those citizen science initiatives. So in order to establish reference conditions, we need to go out to one approach is to go out to some sites that are pretty pristine and collect some information. And in order to do that, we took some advice from Boothroyd, existing stuff, and some contemporary advice from Joanne Klipcott, and set about a desktop exercise to identify potential reference conditions in the Southland region, using some criteria around the proportion of native vegetation, saying that needed to be quite high. And so when we did that, we started off with a relatively large number of river environment classification reaches, 14,000 odd. And as we applied further criteria around the size of the stream, being larger than Australia Order 2 stream, being relatively accessible, and having low intensity, no pastoral land use within the catchment, and then finally applied a randomised site selection, we reduced the number of potential sites from that 14,000 to around 500. And I've got a couple of maps on the right-hand side of your screen there to just illustrate an example from the Longwood Forest, from the start of that selection process, potential sites highlighted in the turquoise green through to the end of that process, a relatively small number of sites remaining as candidate sites. So at the end of this process, we applied randomised selection to that smaller number of sites, and we identified 100 around the region, potential reference sites that we wanted to go out and try and collect some information on invertebrates, water quality, and also apply the rapid habitat assessment protocol. So far we've got out to about 65 of those sites, and 38 of them have been actual rivers where we've been able to collect a sample from. You can appreciate that when you go out to some of these locations, what the river environment classification has predicted as a stream may be a watercourse, but may not be flowing at the time of year that you're out there, or may just be an ephemeral watercourse. So I'm going to talk now about some of the results from the Rapid Habitat Assessment. So if you're not familiar with that, this is a tool that was developed by Cawthron in 2015 and provides an assessment of stream habitat conditions using 10 metrics, and those metrics can be summed to provide an overall score for a site. So just bring the whole slide up so you can see what we're looking at. So this is an overview of the 10 components of the Rapid Habitat Assessment and presents data from the 38 sites that we've collected, showing the variation across each of the components, with 10 being the best score and 0 being the worst score for each of those components. And so from the left, we're looking at deposited fine sediment, invertebrate habitat abundance, invertebrate habitat diversity, fish cover abundance, fish cover diversity, hydraulic heterogeneity, bank erosion, bank vegetation cover, riparian width and riparian shade. And you can see quite a range, generally relatively high scores across reference sites, which is comforting to see. But particularly notable, one site, bank erosion highlighted in red, where there was obvious high numbers of feral deer evidence from footprints and trampling across the stream bed. So on average, from those 38 of the 65 sites and hopefully another few to visit this coming summer, we've seen a medium overall score of 86.5 across all stream types. This could be further subdivided to give a score that's relevant to the classification of a local stream if wanting to interpret information from, say, a lowland area rather than a hill country area. So I'm going to move on now to talk about an example study design and I guess the opportunity that robust study design provides to support citizen science initiatives at a catchment scale in terms of upfront having some input into a study design to ensure that the conclusions drawn are able to be interpreted at a catchment level in terms of overall habitat score for a catchment, and that could be repeated over time to assess change in habitat condition. So this just illustrates the use of a power analysis with a range of confidence levels and margins of error illustrated for consideration, and we've gone on to graphically depict a confidence level of 90% and a margin error of 10%. And so there's a map that's come up on the left there showing a randomised selection for second order streams with 66 sites across the Aparima catchment illustrated with red dots. So there's a further 65 sites that would ideally be targeted from third order streams, 63 from fourth order, 55 from fifth order, etc., to provide an overall assessment of stream habitat condition across the Aparima catchment. So in summary, robust study design has the potential to increase the value of citizen science initiatives, and there's an opportunity to use rapid habitat assessment or habitat assessment tools to support citizen science initiatives. However, there's a need to establish reference conditions to facilitate interpretation as a proportion of reference score. That's the total score for a reach over the relevant reference site condition. And considering the theme, integrating knowledge, reference conditions challenging to quantify. As you can see from the site selection, there's very few reference type sites remaining in the Southland region, and those that are around generally represent hill and higher catchment positions, with relatively few on large rivers. And doing this, we're seeing that we're beginning to develop some really key relationships, more trusted relationships within community groups, and we're having several catchment groups asking us to come out and work with them to train them so that they can go out and conduct habitat surveys within their catchment and better understand catchment. So we see this as really positive because it also really engaging with people. It gets them hands-on, looking at the river, understanding the different components of the river system that are important for resilient, healthy ecosystem function.
Environment Southland.